I opened my eyes and found myself standing at the front door of our family house. Again. From inside came a wave of moaning, low, breathy, unmistakably intimate. My sister's voice, mixed with a man's. "Oh my God, stop. What if my sister catches us?" She giggled behind the bedroom door. It all came rushing back. The betrayal. The lies. The ending. I'd lived this before, 10 years ago. Back when I found my adult sister Molly, in bed with Richard, her former college exam prep tutor. A man 20 years her senior. Married. With a son. In that past life I did what I thought was right. I told our parents. I told his wife. Molly screamed that it was love. Our parents forced her to get an abortion. Shipped her off to Europe for graduate school. Richard's wife divorced him. My parents sued him for coercion and emotional harm. He was sentenced to life in prison. I thought justice had been served. But a decade later, Molly came home, elegant, polished, and trailed by a charming boyfriend. Yet behind closed doors, she confessed that she felt nothing. That her body didn't respond. That I had ruined her. Then she drugged me. Left me unconscious outside a bar. I was assaulted. Beaten. Left to die. Now I was back here. Reborn. Right at the door. Inside, footsteps. The door creaked. Molly stepped out in a half-buttoned shirt, red lipstick smeared at the corners, and a blooming love bite on her collarbone. When she saw me, her eyes went wide. Why are you back so early? Get out of my house." Before I could answer, Richard came stumbling out, belt undone, face red. "What's going on, babe?" "Oh shit." He ducked back into the bedroom. Molly was left staring me down. "I'm an adult. I can sleep with whoever I want. But you better not tell mom and dad. If you do, I swear I'll make them cut you off. You'll be out on the street." I smiled softly. "Don't worry, Molly. I support your freedom, your life, your choices." I turned to leave, and just as I shut the door behind me, I heard her voice, sugar sweet and mocking. "Come out, baby. My sister's harmless. They treat her like a servant anyway. No backbone, no voice. She wouldn't dare snitch." I walked away, smiling. If they wanted to play with fire this time, I'd let it burn everything to the ground. 2 hours later, our parents came home. My mother was chirping orders at me the moment she stepped through the door. "Emily, why didn't you order dinner already? Molly's exhausted from tutoring, and you're just sitting there?" Behind her, Molly tightened the belt on her robe, sending me a sideways warning glance. I swallowed my disgust and forced a smile. I was waiting on my paycheck. "It hasn't hit yet." My dad scoffed, tossing his coat onto my arms. Always an excuse. "You think we like eating late? If you can't handle dinner, how do you expect to get married?" My mother rolled her eyes. "Speaking of which, don't forget to transfer this month's salary to me. Molly needs a new laptop. Hers is slow, and you know she's under pressure." My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from the leasing agent about a room I'd been trying to get for weeks. The next morning before sunrise, I left. One suitcase. Everything I owned. I didn't say goodbye. As I stood outside our building one last time, I looked up at the living room window, where I'd slept on a fold-out bed for the past 10 years, ever since they dragged me back from my grandmother's house to help raise Molly. That apartment had never been mine. I turned and walked away. I transferred to a new branch office in another city, buried myself in work. I thought I had finally escaped them. Until the day I went to the clinic with a mild fever. And ran right into Molly. She wasn't alone. Richard was with her. He glanced around nervously, making sure no one recognized him before placing a hand, far too low, on Molly's waist. She giggled, curling into him like a teenager. "We're in public," she whispered, her cheeks flushed. He leaned in, voice dripping with fake affection. "Relax, babe. You said you've been on the pill. What's the worst that could happen?" "I haven't taken them for months," she said sweetly. "But if I do get pregnant, it'll be our love child." He went pale. I turned away. I didn't want to be involved. Until I left the building, and heard her shout from the third-floor OB/GYN unit. "Richard, we did it. We're going to have a baby." I kept walking. That night, she found my new number. Then she showed up at my office. And this time, I wasn't going to run. Molly barged into my office like she owned the building. The receptionist barely had time to protest before she marched in, heels clacking, silk blouse screaming luxury. She didn't look pregnant, at least not yet, but she carried herself like a victorious queen. "Emily," she said, flashing a toothy smile. "You look plain as always." I didn't stand. "This is a workplace. Oh please. Don't act like you didn't expect me." She took the chair across from my desk and crossed her legs. "I thought we should talk. Woman to woman." I stared at her. "You're not pregnant." She blinked, then smirked. "Not yet. But I could be. He's not exactly careful." "So, you're blackmailing him with a maybe baby?" She grinned. "Blackmail is such a dirty word. Let's call it emotional leverage. You do realize he's facing felony charges if anyone finds out." "Oh, Emily." She leaned in, voice dropping. "You think people care about morality? He left his wife. He chose me. And once I'm pregnant, his family won't be able to ignore me anymore. I'll be the mother of his heir." I said nothing. "I heard you got promoted," she added casually. "Still single though, huh?" I smiled coolly. "Better alone than entangled in incestuous drama." Her eyes narrowed. "Careful," she said. "I know where your skeletons are buried." "You buried them," I reminded her. "But lucky for me, I've come back to dig them up." She tilted her head, studying me. "You've changed." The old Emily would have cried by now. I shrugged. Maybe the old Emily died. Maybe someone else came back in her place. Molly stood slowly. "Well, however reborn you feel, you'd better remember this. I'm still Mom and Dad's favorite, I always will be. And you? You're just the afterthought. The backup daughter? Maybe. But at least I'm not sleeping with someone who changed your diapers when you were 12. That hit her. Her face twisted, and for a second, I saw the fear underneath. Then she composed herself and left. The door clicked shut behind her. I turned back to my screen and calmly opened the encrypted folder I'd been compiling since the moment I woke up in this life again. Emails, photos, voice recordings. If she thought I'd spent the last decade just surviving, she was wrong. This time, I was going to bury her. I didn't need to chase Molly. I knew she'd come back, and when she did, I'd be ready. I spent the next 2 weeks laying traps. First, I sent anonymous tips to the ethics board at Richard's former university, attaching time-stamped footage of him meeting Molly in hotel lobbies. I made sure the hotel staff got a generous tip to confirm the visits. Then I reconnected with an old college friend, now working at a local news station. She owed me a favor. I gave her a folder of information, including a whisper of corruption involving Molly's so-called startup grant that had actually come from our father's retirement account. When I called my mother just to check in, I mentioned offhandedly that I'd seen Molly with a certain someone who looked awfully familiar. That was enough to send our dad into a quiet rage. "After all we sacrificed," he muttered. "She still sees that man." I smiled as I hung up. Everything was in motion. That weekend, Molly showed up again. She looked nervous this time. Her usual smugness dulled. "We need to talk," she said, pacing my apartment like a caged animal. "Someone's been snooping. Richard's freaking out. My bank account's frozen. Mom and Dad are mad at me. And there's a journalist asking questions." "Really?" I said, feigning concern. "That's so weird." She stopped and stared at me. "It was you." I didn't answer. "You're trying to ruin me." I stood slowly. "No, Molly. I'm just evening the score. You're jealous. You always were. Because I'm prettier. Because I got the attention. Because they loved me more." I walked over, closing the space between us. "No," I said calmly. "Because you let a man hurt me. And then you watched me die." Her mouth fell open. "What the hell are you talking about?" I leaned in. "Let's just say, I remember everything now." She backed away. "You're insane." I smiled. "Maybe. But even crazy girls get justice. Eventually." Molly tried to regain control the only way she knew how. Public sympathy. 2 days after our confrontation, she launched a live stream on her Instagram, dressed in a pale cashmere sweater, her hair in soft waves, her expression demure. "I never imagined," she said, voice trembling, That love could become a weapon against me. Comments flooded in. Stay strong, queen. You deserve happiness. Ignore the haters. She played it perfectly, the misunderstood younger daughter, fighting for love in a cruel world. Richard even made a surprise cameo, kissing her forehead and declaring, "She saved me. I was in a dark place, and she gave me light." I nearly choked on my coffee. But I let them play house, because I knew what was coming. The first hit came from the university's ethics board. They issued a formal statement suspending Richard's credentials and opening an investigation into past misconduct. The second came from my journalist friend. An exposé titled, "Gold-Plated Lies: How a Startup Princess Stole Her Way to the Top." Molly's fake credentials, falsified business grants, and financial fraud with our father's accounts were laid bare. My parents called me in a fury. "Did you have something to do with this?" my mother demanded. I didn't answer. "She's devastated," my father added. "If you had a shred of decency." I hung up. Because Molly wasn't devastated. She was furious. She showed up at my office that night. No cameras. No smiles. Just rage. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "All you've done is expose our family's dirt. Now none of us have a future." "You're right," I said. "None of us do. That includes me. I died once, remember?" Her face froze. "I told you," I said. "I remember everything." "You're crazy," she muttered. I was. "Not anymore." She lunged at me, grabbing my collar, screaming, "You ruined everything!" I let her hit me. Let her leave red welts on my face, because the cameras in my office recorded every second. When security pulled her off me, I pressed charges: assault, defamation, harassment. She posted bail the next morning, sobbing to the press about being betrayed by her own sister. But public opinion had turned. They didn't see a princess anymore. They saw a liar, a predator, a fraud. And for the first time in her life, Molly wasn't beloved. She was alone. And I wasn't finished. Molly's mugshot spread like wildfire. Not because she looked disheveled, but because she didn't. Her glossy hair, her smirking lips, her designer blouse, it all screamed entitlement. The tabloids dubbed her the glamour felon. Her followers turned against her. Every past victim came forward. Former friends, business partners, even one of Richard's college-aged students. They all had stories. And I amplified them. My journalist friend published an interview with a woman who said Molly conned her out of $80,000 in a fake investment scheme. Another woman claimed Molly used her identity to open a credit line. A third said Molly bullied her into silence after leaking private photos. One after another, the lawsuits piled up. And then came the blow she never expected. Richard's ex-wife filed a civil suit against both Molly and Richard, citing emotional distress, financial damages, and intentional infliction of public humiliation. The court froze their assets. I was sipping tea when my father showed up at my door. His hair had gone gray, and for the first time in my life, he looked small. "You need to help her," he said quietly. "She's your sister." "No," I replied. "She was your favorite, now she's your problem." He looked like he wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. "She's not evil," he whispered. "She's just lost." "No, Dad, she's not lost, she's a map with no morals." And she walked straight into this disaster with her eyes wide open. He left without another word. 2 weeks later, Richard was arrested on new charges: fraud, exploitation, obstruction of justice. Molly collapsed in court during a preliminary hearing. She sobbed to the judge about being manipulated, misled, misunderstood. But no one was listening anymore. Because when you build your empire on lies, the foundation always crumbles. I walked out of the courtroom that day, and looked up at the gray sky. Rain was coming. Perfect. Let it wash the last pieces of her kingdom away. The fallout spread like mold. Quietly, steadily, infecting every corner of Molly's life. Richard refused to take her calls from jail. He'd turned state's witness to lessen his sentence, handing over emails, chat logs, and financial statements. Everything. Molly's lawyer begged her to settle. "If we go to trial, you're looking at 5 to 10 years, he warned. "Maybe more." "But I didn't do anything," she shrieked. "I was in love. That's not a crime. He stared at her. You forged documents. You defrauded investors. You threatened witnesses. That is a crime? In desperation, she turned to our mother. You've always protected me. Please, just tell the court I was framed. Say it was Emily. Say she's been obsessed with me for years. My mother actually paused. For the first time in decades, she didn't jump to Molly's defense. You dragged this family through hell, she said. And you expect me to lie for you again? Molly's voice cracked. You said I was your miracle. My mother's eyes brimmed with tears. You were. But maybe the miracle was a curse in disguise. When I got the call to appear in court as a witness, I didn't hesitate. Molly sat across from me in the courtroom, shackled at the wrists. She tried to smile, tried to conjure that sisterly charm, but it didn't reach her eyes. The prosecutor asked me one question. Why do you think she did it? I looked Molly in the face. Because she believed the world owed her love, even if she had to steal it. Because she believed no rules applied to her. Because she thought she could bury everyone who ever stood in her way. Molly finally broke. Right there in court. She sobbed. She screamed. She confessed. To everything. The fraud. The affair. The blackmail. Even the assault. But it was too late. The judge sentenced her to 6 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 3. As she was led away, she looked at me one last time and mouthed, "Why?" I didn't answer. Because she already knew. 6 months passed. I got promoted again, moved into a downtown condo with sunlight in every room. My mornings were slow, my nights silent. No more screaming matches. No more insults over dinner. No more hiding in my own home. Mom called once after the sentencing. She keeps asking for you, she said softly. I said nothing. I think she still doesn't understand why you testified. She doesn't get to understand, I replied. Not anymore. My mother sighed. You've changed? No, I said. I just finally stopped pretending. On Molly's birthday, I received a letter, handwritten. Pages and pages of what she claimed was an apology. It was filled with phrases like "I didn't know better," and "You were always stronger than me." At the bottom she had scribbled, "Will you ever forgive me?" I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and never answered. Because peace doesn't come from revenge. It comes from absence. I stood by my window that night, sipping tea, watching the city lights blink like signals from another universe. Somewhere out there, Molly sat in a concrete room with no windows and no mirrors. And I, for the first time in 2 lives, was free.